Hello everyone, and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar, today sponsored by our friends at Esri. I'm Barbary Duke, Managing Editor here at Directions Magazine, with our assistant webinar producer, Lynette Qualia. We also appreciate you stopping by directionsmag.com for other articles, webinars, podcasts, and of course the daily news. We are excited to welcome Maria, Michelle, and Kira. Today, they have insights and demos on using maps for participatory planning in your organization using ArcGIS Hub and ArcGIS Urban. Very exciting stuff. Welcome, ladies. We are so glad to have you with us today and excited to learn more. So with that, Maria, over to you to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbary, for the warm welcome. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We're so glad you could join us. Today, we'll be showing you some cool community engagement tools and sharing a new web-based workflow that we hope will provide you new strategies for how to gather input from your community. You'll learn how to use digital maps to engage with constituents and collect crowdsourced inputs from the residents. And then you'll easily be able to generate usable insights. We've got a lot to cover, so let me kick us off by introducing my colleagues, Michelle and Kira, who will be your presenters. Michelle Fleming is a consultant with Esri's Professional Services, supporting the Built Environment Department. She works closely with customers supporting their use of ArcGIS Urban and 3D data, and her background is in environmental science, urban planning, and GIS. And Kira Morish is a solution engineer for our Smart City Solutions team at Esri. Her background is in landscape architecture and education. And at Esri, she focuses on ArcGIS Urban, Esri's web-based 3D platform, to create and improve urban planning, decision-making, and community engagement. Our talk today will cover the ArcGIS workflow for supporting participatory planning and doing the analysis for uncovering 4 key usable insights. This workflow is divided into 4 parts and includes using 3 ArcGIS products, ArcGIS Hub, ArcGIS Urban, and ArcGIS Online together to accomplish different parts of the process. I'll hand it over to Michelle now to get us started to go over part 1.
Great, thank you so much, Maria. Part 1 of our workflow focuses on getting things set up at the beginning of our project. This means we need to establish the platform and the tools we want our participants to use. The hypothetical project we're working on is called Ala Moana Connecting Roads, which is focused on identifying ways to improve how neighborhoods are interconnected in and near the Ala Moana area in Honolulu, Hawaii. So we're really in the beginning stages of what a typical project process is like, and we're focused on gathering information from our community before working on drafting policies. So we need to establish a platform that will set us up for success with this first stage and continue to support the later stages. This platform needs to support the full project process, from project kickoff to community workshops, all the way through drafting alternatives and drafting final plans that will be presented at Planning Commission or City Council meetings. ArcGIS Hub is a great platform for us to use because it's cloud-based and it really focuses on engagement. It can also support our engagements later on in the process, and we can use it to keep our participants or anyone interested in the project up to date. For this first workshop, we want to create a registration page for our participants to sign up at. And fortunately, to set up a Hub site, you don't need any web expertise. With Hub, you have access to templates. So I can use the community workshop template, and everything needed to make the Hub is created for me already, like the registration form. And once I land on the Hub site, it's easy to make changes to match your organization's branding guidelines. For the registration form, we're asking residents to provide a name, email address, and other details that will help planners set up the workshop for their involvement. We can include information they need to participate in the first workshop and can include information about other events. And other elements like the project goals are all editable to match the project you're working on. Plus, you can add images like a timeline to support your residents throughout the planning process. Once I'm satisfied with my edits, I can save and publish them, and I can easily make the website publicly accessible so my residents can start registering for the workshop. Now that the foundation of the tools we're using is taken care of, we'll step you through an example of our community workshop. This workshop, which is part of our Connecting Roads project, is really focused on issues and opportunities our residents have identified. This project is about connecting roads, but your project can be about anything your planning department needs to gather feedback on. Specifically, our goal is to gather data from our participants that will help us decide where to focus our efforts on. And we want their perspective on what the future of transit for connecting neighborhoods could be. For this workshop, we've identified two main opportunities for improving the community that we'd like to get more information about from our residents. The first is their opinion on how to develop an area where there used to be a mall. And the second is ways transit between neighborhoods can be improved to make it easier for pedestrians, bicyclists, and those taking public transportation. And with those two main opportunities in mind, we've identified 4 specific feedback areas that will be helpful. The first being improvements or new locations for transit nodes, which would include bus stations, car parking, and bike storage. The second is arterial connections residents use often to focus improvement efforts on streetscapes, biking lanes, and walking trails. The third is streets that are frequently used for connection between neighborhoods. And finally, in that development area where the former mall was, which buildings are preferred by residents and where they'd like to have designated green space. In order to gather all of that feedback, we'll be using ArcGIS Urban, which is a web-based solution that applies GIS technology to urban planning to streamline plan creation, analyze the impact of plans, and visualize current projects. Specifically, we'll be using the projects feature, which will allow the participants to use 3D objects to submit their feedback. And setting up a project in Urban is easy. We start by adding that project by drawing the boundary of our area of interest. We can turn the parcels on to help with drawing, and then can also add a name and address to our project. Now that the project has loaded, we can configure the settings and bring in more contextual information at just the project level. For this project, since we need a legend for the 3D objects, we're adding a web scene that will show the legend for each scenario we create. And now it's time to fill in our legend with the 3D objects we will ask participants to place on the map. To start, we'll select a rock from the street furniture objects to indicate the participant's neighborhood. We'll also choose light posts to indicate their favorite places. Traffic cones will notate the areas that need improvement, and bikes will indicate places they frequently ride. And selecting just a handful of objects to choose from will help with the analysis later on. To get a better sense of our participants' preferred building heights, we'll be creating buildings they can drag and drop. And this controls the height and gives them the option of only short, medium, or tall buildings to make our data collection around this topic simpler. Since green spaces are typically indicated by a natural ground, along with vegetation, we're providing both options. And finally, we will demolish the existing mall to provide a space to place the buildings and the green space. So now that our scenario is ready to go, we need to duplicate it in order to have one scenario per participant. And this is based off of the registration that we received through ArcGIS Hub. This is super easy to do since we can create additional scenarios based on the work we've already done in this one. So now that we've identified the focus areas for feedback, set up our ArcGIS Urban project, and established a way for participants to register through ArcGIS Hub, now we're ready to host our first workshop. And I'll hand it over to Kira to go over how we'll be collecting the feedback.
Thanks, Michelle. In this section, we'll go over in detail exactly how we collected feedback from the residents. Using techniques outlined here, we'll show you how to collect the data in a visual format that you can share with the City Council, executives, business people, or members of the community. The activity was designed to give attendees a chance to tell the planning team about their ideas to improve the study area. What you're seeing now is a recording of the individual screen from 6 of the participants in our Ala Moana Connecting Roads Hypothetical Urban Planning Project. Each participant was able to share their ideas on the map using the tools in ArcGIS Urban. When doing this in your community, you can collect and compile feedback from any number of residents. The input you receive can be analysed in ArcGIS when new insights are revealed. To collect the feedback, we use 3 methods. In the first method, participants placed objects in response to questions or prompts. For example, we asked where they wanted to see more pedestrian or bike-friendly streets. In the second method, sketching buildings allowed residents to provide input about the types of uses they prefer. From this part of the exercise, we discovered that a strong majority favoured medium-density development for the area. Finally, attendees provided comments explaining why they made certain decisions. Now let's take a look at each of these methods in more detail. In this part of the exercise, we asked residents to indicate where they live, places they frequent, streets in need of improvement, and where we can increase the connections between neighbourhoods. This exercise helped participants visualise their area and think about planning issues that may be of interest to them. Next, we placed initial building types for attendees to put in the redevelopment area. The buildings were based on heights and equated to high, medium, and low density. The heights are also related to uses like residential towers, multi-level retail, and mixed use. This part of the exercise gathered information about what residents feel works well in the area and what they'd like to see more of. Here, participants added comments explaining why they chose specific locations. For example, one participant explained their decision to limit the height of buildings in the redevelopment area to maintain ocean views. Feedback like this is helpful because it provides insight into the rationale behind participants' decision-making processes. It also provides an opportunity for participants to make additional comments not directly related to our primary questions. From other comments collected, we discovered that residents would like to see a new school and supermarket in the area, and they'd like a water park to be built as a source of revenue. Part 3 describes the tools we use to analyse the participant feedback and the insights gained from the results. We used ArcGIS Online to manage and analyse the data collected from residents. The overall goal of the analysis is to turn data into actionable information. We want to quantify the patterns we see in the data and have confidence in the decisions we make based on the analysis results. The tools we'll show you run directly in the browser, and the results are easily shared internally and with the participants of the workshop. In ArcGIS Online, we'll find the data from our workshop in the project's feature layer. Within that feature layer are the layers you see to the right. The 3D buildings are in the LOD1 buildings layer. The 3D objects, like the bikes or traffic cones, are in the point symbols layer. And the ground surface polygons are in the polygon symbols layer. We have just a little bit of data prep to do in ArcGIS Online to get our data ready for the analysis. First, we need to filter our 3D buildings based on their heights, creating separate low, medium, and high density building layers. This way we can visualize the different building heights in our analysis results. Second, we need to filter our 3D objects. We do this by an attribute indicating what the 3D symbol is. This gives us separate layers for each object. Finally, for our green space data, which has both green space polygons and tree points, we'll run find centroids on the polygons and then merge them with the tree points. This allows us to consider both layers in our analysis results. This is the final web map with the data symbolized and prepared for analysis. Now we'll move on to the first type of analysis we ran, which was density analysis. To begin, we're interested in getting an overview of the spatial patterns in our data. Density analysis shows us where residents prefer one location over another. In this example, the input data shows places residents love to visit. The results show the darker purple areas are visited more frequently, and the light purple sites are less often visited. We ran this density analysis on 4 other datasets. Arterial connections identified where residents felt streets could be improved. Neighbourhood connections showed potential locations for bike or walking paths, making streets more pedestrian and bike friendly. Building heights show where there's a preference for low, medium or high density development. And green spaces show where residents would like to see parks and recreational green spaces.
This is a really meaningful exercise for planners because it provides a visual indication of where participants feel it's important to focus on. Density analysis is a great first analysis that takes us beyond looking at just our results on a map, which is often sticky dots or post-it notes. For transit nodes, density analysis helps us identify potential locations for things like bus stations or car parking. And because we've collected this data through ArcGIS Online, we can run more workshops to add to our data set and even expand our analysis, perhaps to better understand where areas may be better suited for a new transit stop, or even identify what impact that decision may have on current transit patterns. Density analysis with the arterial connections shows us areas our participants are most interested in improving in terms of movement throughout the area. We could add to the analysis and see if the path exists already, and if so, how we may be able to improve it. And if there isn't an existing path, we can design what that may look like and see how it could positively impact the area. For our neighborhood connections result, this indicates where residents already feel there are main connection points. So based on this result, we can analyze which areas may need pedestrian supportive design efforts or maybe improved bike lanes. But we can also expand this to try and recognize where connection points aren't preferred and maybe why. Perhaps it's a safety issue, or maybe there's a lack of sidewalks. And we can use other GIS layers to help better understand the existing conditions. And finally, our building height and green spaces density analysis results together give us a sense of what our participants would like to experience in the area available for development. This analysis shows us generally where they want the different building heights and where they would like to see green spaces. And this could contribute towards our design requirements or recommendations. In one area, residents may want taller buildings with different types of uses that may support having a more urban feel. But in other areas, they may want shorter buildings and more green space to feel more open and expansive in the area. Density analysis is really useful as a first analysis, but we do have additional analysis that can define, validate, or further explore the results. And we'll go through a few examples and offer the insights we've gained.
The next analysis we ran was a hotspot analysis. This quantifies the spatial patterns we saw in the density analysis results. The results show statistically significant clustering, which tells us the patterns we see are meaningful and not the result of random chance. In this example, the input data show where residents prefer to see tall, medium, or short buildings. We specify a value to base the clusters on. In this case, it's height. The output shows clusters of high values in red, buildings with a height of 400 feet or so, and low values in blue, buildings with the height of 50 feet or so. The range of red and blue values relates to the confidence level. So you can say with different confidence levels that the patterns you see are significant and not random.
One important part of hotspot analysis that I want to reiterate is that it identifies what's statistically significant. So it helps narrow down our results into what is a more significantly common response and can give us valid data to make decisions based off of. In this example, we can see that participants prefer the taller buildings closer to walkable major thoroughfare, indicated by the dark red polygons. From the exercise in ArcGIS Urban, we could also see that they prefer those buildings close to existing tall buildings as well, because of the 3D base map. Participants may want to see a more designated pedestrian corridor with buildings that support different types of use in the ground floors. In the center of the property, where there are blue polygons, they prefer keeping the buildings shorter, perhaps not obstructing the ocean view.
The next analysis we ran was a point cluster analysis. This tool detects areas where points are concentrated and separated by areas that are empty or sparse. Points that aren't part of a cluster are labeled as noise. We use this tool to refine the insights we gained from both the analysis, for both the density analysis and the hotspot analysis. The input data we use for the point cluster analysis shows locations on streets where residents want to see improvement. We defined the minimum number of points needed to be a cluster, and the results show clusters in different colours, indicating general areas of concern. Taking the point cluster analysis a step further, we ran the central feature and directional trend tool to summarise the spatial characteristics of the data. The tool illustrates the data's central tendency, dispersion or concentration, and directionality. The blue dots indicate the central feature of clusters, and the ellipses indicate directional trends.
I really love this tool because this type of analysis is pretty difficult to do based on sight alone. And having the visual indication of the clusters symbolized by their color, along with the directional trend, are both powerful and useful result layers to have. We can use the colored layer to better understand groupings in relation to their location. In this case, because our points are speaking to desired street improvements, the colors give us an indication of main areas to focus on and could be used to organize efforts. With the directional trend, we have a central point and an ellipses to visualize. If we wanted to gather more specific information, we could use the central point for an on-site street inventory and use the ellipses to give us direction to extend the survey. We could also use it to see which properties maybe would need to be notified about improvement efforts.
The next analysis we ran was finding outliers. We use this tool to identify features that have values that are significantly different from their neighbours. This shows us where feedback differs from the majority. Like hotspot analysis, we see clusters of high and low values, but we also see where high values surround low values and vice versa. The results of this tool provide interesting insights. It's interesting because Tobler's law, the first law of geography, states that everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. So when we see results that counter this statement, like low values next to high values, further investigation is warranted.
Identifying outliers can be an important part of analysis because sometimes keeping outliers in your analysis can skew your results. For planning efforts, it shows us where a very small number of responses differs from the consensus. So for our building heights, the dark blue polygons to the left of the property indicate where participants suggested small buildings. It's considered an outlier because most participants want high buildings there. The dark red polygon in the middle indicates that a participant wanted a high building, but most of the participants wanted the opposite. So we can choose to disregard outliers in our analysis, and we can see how the result changes if we redo the analysis. Or we could actually investigate those responses further and see why a participant voted the way they did. This concludes a summary of the analysis process and the insights we've gained. Our main intention was to identify attainable ways for planners to go beyond the typical data they acquire when doing community outreach. And due to the way we collected the feedback, we can easily run analysis on it to be more confident making data-driven decisions. This workflow supports a set of analyses that can be helpful even for planners that have limited GIS resources. Great. Part 4 brings us to expanding and building with future engagement. We'll be covering some options and opportunities for additional participation. But let's recap where we are. So we've established the way we're going to allow our residents to sign up for our community workshop through ArcGIS Hub. We have established the project within ArcGIS Urban that will enable them to provide their feedback. With part 3, we've conducted analysis and gained some insights on the data through ArcGIS Online. And now with part 4, we'll cover how to expand with our community engagement further on with our process. For future workshops, we can use the same template as before. We can activate a second community workshop and include supporting information about where we are in the project process. Because ArcGIS Hub is easy to customize, we can include the results from our first workshop and even recap what decisions we made based on their feedback. We have an option to reach out to our first participants based on their registration information as well. It's a quick and organized way to continue our planning processes. One really new exciting feature in ArcGIS Hub is the option for mobile map-based feedback. Our community workshop was a guided experience for our users, but this is an additional capability we can include to expand our participant reach for those who may prefer engaging in this way. Users can add a pin to a map, answer a survey question we prompt them with, and then see their answer. And since our results are map-based, we can use the same analysis we covered previously to gather insight and make data-driven decisions. Thanks, Kira. In this example, residents are given the opportunity to give feedback on how many charging stations for electric vehicles would be helpful. This new feature has the ability to expand our participant pool because it gives the users an option to answer this survey at a time that's convenient to them. And since our survey results are map-based, we could use density analysis to see which areas are more preferred. And we can even take it further to look at our results with existing conditions to see if parking options are already supported in those areas. The goal here is to expand our engagement tool set to make collaboration with the community we plan for easier. So to wrap up our thoughts, we'd like to summarize the key takeaways that we've essentially provided 2 ways to build future engagement to get useful insights. The first is a complete workflow for doing online engagement with residents. And this workflow was designed to be useful to planners, architecture and planning firms, communications, and GIS managers. Hopefully there are a number of aspects of this workflow and set of tools that will help those who may be short on GIS resources or would like ways of collaborating more closely with their GIS colleagues. The second way that will be key for really growing engagement is the mobile map-based feedback we just discussed. It's designed to be easily scaled for broad or focused feedback. And the goal is really to help expand who we get feedback from. With the mobile map-based feedback, residents will be able to engage outside of scheduled events and still have an opportunity to make their voices heard.
I guess while the poll's coming back up, we could take a look at some questions if there's any.
Sure. Yes, Kira, we have received a question a little bit ago while you were going through some of that analysis, and the question is, what are cold spots?
Cold spots are clusters of low values. So depending on what your data is, what the numbers are, I guess, in the attribute table, it's looking at clusters where there's lower values and those locations are close together. So for our example, we were using height as the value. So we saw clusters of low values, which indicated locations where people wanted to see the shorter buildings, which equates more or less to low or medium density development.
So we hope that you've taken away some new ideas and about how to increase stakeholder collaboration in your community. Using these techniques that Michelle and Kira have shared today, you can provide an opportunity for all the voices to be heard by supporting conventional engagement activities alongside digital content and surveys that drive the conversation. You'll be able to reach new audiences and ensure equitable representation from the community. On the screen right now, you'll see a variety of URLs that point to resource pages that will help you learn more about how to get started. The comprehensive resource pages for each of the products, there's one for Hub and Urban and Online. They include pointer links to a bunch of other content, including blogs from the product teams, videos, what we call learn lessons, which will step you through actual exercises where you can take a peek and practice using the tools, the training classes that correspond to these products, and more. We'll also share all of these links in a follow-up email to you, as Barbary mentioned, so you'll be able to find those hyperlinks very easily. And basically, we'll be here to answer any questions you have going forward. So that being said, have seen a few questions come through, so let me start directing those to Kira and Michelle. So here's a question that's a really good one. Are all of the analysis tools web-based, or do I have to have ArcGIS Pro?
That's a great question, and they are all web-based. A lot of the powerful tools that you saw exist in ArcGIS Pro as well, and they're being ported to the web-based environment. So that's all you need, the internet connection, ArcGIS Online, and you can run these analyses directly in the web.
Awesome. And then another question regarding the analysis results. So Kira, how can we share these analysis results is the question coming through.
Okay, so there's a variety of different ways. We could use ArcGIS Hub, as we started that as the community workshop central location where we're hosting the workshop, and they can have access to surveys. It's also an opportunity to share through either a web map, for example, the results of the analysis, and maybe some text explaining and interpreting what those results mean. And because we're working in ArcGIS Online, We also have access to a range of other apps that could be used. For example, story maps could be used to share the results as well. I don't know, Michelle, if you have any other ideas.
Yeah, actually, if any of our participants are interested or are currently using ArcGIS Urban, you can also create web scenes out of the results, and you could pull that in to your urban model, and then that way you can actually look at your analysis results within the context of your model or specific plans or projects.
Great. Here's another great question, and it has to do with access. So the question is, how do members of the public have access to Urban, and do they need licenses to do this? Michelle?
Sure. So with ArcGIS Urban, you have the capability of having a public-facing portion of your model. So it's not like a separate model or anything. It's basically any projects or plans that you publish to the public. So yeah, and public users do not need a license. All you would do is share that specific link to them, or you can even embed an urban model in your web page or share it in other ways, like a story map or a hub page as well.
Perfect. And a follow-up to that question was, can this type of exercise also work with an in-person event?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that, you know, it's flexible to where you can curate it if you're going to have a specific group of people you want to work with, or if you are going to share it to the public. Really, that workflow is going to be the same.
That's great. And now we've just received another question asking, can we bring the workshop results into ArcGIS Pro if we wanted to? Maybe
Yeah.
that for Kira or either one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So those results that you produce within ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro has this awesome feature where you can actually connect to your portal within ArcGIS Pro. And that gives you access to data that you have on ArcGIS Online. So it's really as easy as clicking within the contents to your portal and then dragging and dropping the results into your ArcGIS Pro map.
Thanks, Michelle. Here's a question about the use of Urban. Our questioner is asking, is the Urban functionality only for city planning? What about regional planning? For instance, renewable energy, windmills, etc.
That's a great question. I actually work with a good number of regional planning organizations right now, so it's definitely for regional planners as well. And we also do have consulting groups that use ArcGIS Urban.
Cool. Now, the next question coming in is, how many pages or templates are we able to make in Hub? Is there a limit? And Kira, do you
That's
want to
a
take
good
that one?
question, and I don't have an answer for it. I might have to look it up a little bit to see if we can get that information to the person who asked the question.
I think I can answer that one. There is no limit. You can build as many Hub web pages, websites as you like. So those sites can be used to feature different projects that you're working on, any of these types of exercises that you're working with the community. So you can have one about bike lanes and another one about something totally different, and as many as you like. Okay, here's a good question. Does the public get to vote on proposals more than once? And how do you know if the public that voted on a proposal is from the impacted neighborhood? That's a really great question.
I think I would maybe need to clarify what voting is, if that actually means just participating in the workshop and moving the 3D objects around and that kind of thing. If that's the answer, then I think that it just depends on how many of those types of events you want to hold. But because you were using ArcGIS Hub for the registration page, you have access to that individual's contact information. So if you did want to redo that process, you could. And I'm sorry, Maria, what was the second part of the question?
Yes, how do you know if the public that voted, so we'll say it's correct of what you were assuming, that they've moved things around in the exercise. So how do you know if they're part of the impacted neighborhood?
Sure, that's a great question. I think if you wanted to understand that information, you could ask that while they're registering, perhaps, or you could ask it as a question within the exercise. So for this specific example, we asked users to drag a rock where their neighborhood was. So you could ask in that way as well. But there's several different ways that you could get that information from your participants.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then also, because they've registered on the hub page, that each user would have their own login and associated contact information. So that would be another way to kind of look at things. Here's another question that just came in, is that, does ArcGIS Urban have a feature to add a survey in addition to the participatory mapping aspect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So within ArcGIS Urban, we have something that's called public feedback, which a planner or whoever created the plan has access to establishing what that timeline is going to be, or that time frame. And then from that point, you're going to enable that public feedback. So it's really similar to the internal feedback portion that we showed you in the example today, where users can add a comment and kind of drag and drop it in the scene. You also have the ability with ArcGIS Hub, if you want, you can actually create a page where you've embedded your urban model on one side, and then perhaps created a survey. And so you could embed a web page like that as well. Or the mobile map-based feedback, again, is that option where you have the interactive map with the survey that you can create questions for.
Thanks, Michelle. Here's another question that came that's asking, is ArcGIS Urban part of ArcGIS Online? Can you explain that a little bit, about how to get the tools, where they come from?
Sure. So ArcGIS Urban is part of ArcGIS Online. You would need to actually purchase a license to use it. So that's kind of how you would get access to it.
Okay, great. And then this question is kind of related to the use of Urban and different areas you might use it. It says, is it possible to use ArcGIS Urban if you are planning to develop a project for a rural area?
Yeah, definitely. I think you could really, have your urban model anywhere. So oftentimes, we'll kind of focus on larger cities or downtown areas, but I've had customers that definitely live in a more rural area. And what's great about it is, those features are the same no matter what size of a city that you're part of. So you can still do that sort of drag and drop with the 3D objects and sketch your buildings, or actually do area planning or long range planning as well.
Thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Kira, too, for answering all those questions. It looks like that we've covered everything that's come in. So if there's anything else, any other pressing questions, please let us know right now. There is one last one that came in. Well, we can answer this one, and then we'll probably wrap up. So this one says, can ArcGIS Hub be used for project management? Kira, do you want to take that?
Yeah, Kira?
I'm going to guess that it definitely can be, but if there's Maria, if you wanted to chime in there, that could be helpful too.
Sure. So I think we talk about using ArcGIS Hub for different initiatives, and so if you have something in your community that you're working on, whether that be homelessness or some type of volunteerism projects, things like that. So definitely you can use a hub site to kind of organize all of those materials, all of the information, maybe resources community can access, or place to register to provide your volunteer services and things like that. So yes, it definitely could be used to kind of manage an initiative, goals, projects, things like that. So, and then those pages that you create, you can coordinate with your stakeholders and kind of create teams of individuals that can work on different things, and those teams can have access to resources in different controlled manners. So definitely it's something you should look into Hub and all of the different ways that you can use it in your community. So I think with that, we encourage you to take a look at the resources that we've shared. We thank you for joining us and for participating in this participatory planning workshop. Hope to see you all be able to put some of these tools to action. And thanks for joining us. And please feel free and don't be afraid to contact us. We'd love to help you and hear about what you're doing in your community.
Thank you so much, Maria, and Michelle and Kira as well. A great job showing off some opportunities to use cool tools in our communities. We hope that you go make it a great day. Tell a friend about Esri and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everybody.